Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to Star Wars Lads. We've got for you all our predictions and speculation for episode 7 of The Acolyte, the penultimate episode. We're almost there to the end, and this next episode promises to reveal a lot as we get our second flashback episode. Make sure you like the video, helps us out so much with the channel. Subscribe for more. We do have one more predictions video coming for you all before The Acolyte is over. And then, of course, join us live every single week, 7 p.m. Pacific on Tuesdays to talk about The Acolyte and send in your questions, your comments, your theories live with us. And we get to discuss all of that in the chat with all of you. So make sure you join us for that. Without further ado, let's just get into The Acolyte. Episode 7. It is being directed by Kogonada, who directed episode 3 with the witches and the flashback that we saw in that episode. So we're finally getting back to that story after 4 episodes. We're finally back there. And this past episode, episode 6, had 2 different endings, right? We end the episode with both May and Osha having their own ending. May strapped down, imprisoned by Soul, who is telling her, I've thought about a long time what I would say to you if I saw you again, and here it is. And then it cuts to black and we don't hear anything that he says because we're going to see it in the flashback. Then you cut to Osha and she puts on the Cortosis helmet and she's really tuning out her senses, getting in touch with everything that's kind of underneath her subconscious, the things she knows that might be suppressed by the things she's been told. So we're going to get a flashback, and it'll probably be from 2 different perspectives, Soul and this time Osha, but from a less repressed memory, maybe the more accurate version that we're going to see. With all that said, Sanak, what do you think is going to happen in episode 7 of The Acolyte?
I think coming into this episode 6 specifically, I was a little bit more confident it would just be May, the Jedi, a little bit more of the witches of Brendok. That's not really the case with some of the questions posed now by Qimir, questions posed by Vernestra, and especially with the possibility that Qimir might have also been an ex-Jedi, and whatever Vernestra is sort of getting herself into might be her own cover-up that's even bigger than what happened on Brendok or was somehow sourced into that. Like, there's a lot of players now, and I don't really know how all this flashback will go. I'm only really depending on what we've seen in BTS in the TV spots. We know at some point that smoking Chekhov's gun of the possession that Mother Aniseya does on Torben will be used again. It seems very likely to be Kalnaka, what we've seen in episode 4 in his hut of the little yin-yang like symbols that are on May's forehead and on all the witches. So it feels like he's going to be possessed and kind of be turned against the Jedi. So we're going to have that fight against Torben where he's leaping in the air. We're definitely going to have a little bit of that BTS fight between Kalnaka and Soul as well. So we've seen those 3. We haven't seen, of course, the 4th character, which is Indara. And Indara is the one who's kind of been the most determined to do things they need to do. She's very gruff, not necessarily stoic, but my way or the highway does feel like a lot of what her character embodies. It takes a distraction from May in their opening fight, a little bit of a cheap shot, honestly, to get her knocked out. So I would say that she could be involved in the fight and she could have some cool action, especially since she already had some cool stuff in episode 1. But I do feel like there is that shot of the Jedi kind of crawling up that fortress, and it very much could be like her doing that. It could also be Soul, because again, he is following Coral and the twins at the start of that flashback. But whatever dynamic is happening between those 2, they're going to inform more of the side of the investigation, what is happening on the witches, what they've been suspecting, what they've been trailing these characters that are only in that episode 3 flashback this entire time. There's also that reaction shot that we have of Indar where she's like force concentrating or like listening to something. She's almost like shocked out of it, and she's with Soul. So it would be pretty interesting if Soul manages to like recover something, maybe some Sith artifact or something that was used in the creation of the twins, and then maybe she has psychometry like Quinlan Voss is able to touch and see the shatter points, and then suddenly she notices or realizes the truth of the situation that these mothers have used to create the twins, and why the Jedi would be so judgmental, would be very against it, like the way Mother Coral talks about when she's arguing with Mother Aniseya. So we know those from the footage that we have, but it's the arrangement that is very confusing for me. I think it would be pretty smart no matter what to just follow what May is doing before she even meets Osha at the tree and what happens afterwards. Especially, I want to see a lot of her with Coral because they have a lot more of a closer bond, whereas Osha and Aniseya have that bond, and we follow that throughout episode 3. I want to see a little bit more why May gets more and more riled up. I want to see a little bit more, and I expect to see a little bit more of why everything goes to flames. I don't expect it to just be that fire that May kind of starts on the door. It feels like that reactor, that shot that we have, it was definitely rigged to blow. Now, is it rigged to blow by Coral because she just wants to create a scene and put the blame on the Jedi? Maybe. It could also definitely be the Jedi seeing whatever they discover about the twins' birth, kind of doing something, and maybe that's what Indara is doing, and Soul's like, oh no, why did you do this? You're gonna kill all of them, and that's where the blame lies. That's a good way to keep Soul to have a very burdensome secret, be unable to save May, only save Osha, but still keep the blame on Indara, who has been the Jedi knocked out for the most part of the story. So I can definitely see that. I think how these will connect between what Soul is telling May and what we're going to get from Osha with the helmet of Qimir is that visions that have been kind of connecting them, they have a very strong force bond. I don't necessarily want to call it a dyad per se, because they're not transferring anything, but twins, like we've seen with Luke and Leia, they can sense each other. We've seen that in episode 4 and 5. But the visions that they've had have been very curious and have only really happened when Osha has been knocked out. So once you're putting her in the sensory deprivation of sorts, I do wonder if maybe she starts to connect with her own memories, and then whatever May's hearing and experiencing from listening to what Soul was doing on Brendok, maybe they start like subconsciously, which is a big word that Qimir uses, but subconsciously like kind of connecting the stories together across their time and space, across their bond that they have together. So it'd be fascinating if at the end of the episode we do get like maybe like a 5-minute present day story where not only does Soul tell the full story to May, not only does Osha know more about what happened from her POV and what might have been disrupted by a little bit of a force wipe or a force trick on her memory, but they also get the other twins' perspective on what was happening when they weren't in the same room. And I think that could be really fascinating when they have the full story, because not only would they kind of be allied to some degree with each other for the first time since they were little kids, but they would also be able to like kind of press their advantages on who they're with. Now, that advantage could be something that Qimir could obviously manipulate and be fine with and like kind of take her to Brendok for episode 8. But the advantage that May gets from knowing what happened to Osha, and especially the uncensored version of sorts, that could really turn the tables on Soul, and that kind of also forces all of them to go to Brendok. So I could very much see something like that. I could very much see them maybe try to tie in the space chase at the start of episode 8 as a result, because everyone's going to the same place. But regardless, I think the memories kind of coalesce and we get a full story between them at the same time, which I think would be pretty disruptive to both parties.
For this episode, for me, there's two ways of looking at it, right? There's the predictions of things I want personally for this show, for it to kind of redeem itself in a lot of ways, for things to start making sense, to be a little bit more clear on what's going on and what character motivations are. And then there's the thought about the realistic side, right? What are they going to do? What are they going to do in a presumably 40-ish minute episode, maybe less? The longest episode of the show so far was episode 3, so I think we can bet that maybe this episode will be just as long, if not a little longer. I would be very disappointed if it's shorter than 36 minutes, but I would hope for at least a 40-minute episode here, which I know, crazy to think about for getting a 40-minute episode in live action TV, but I hope that this is the longest episode of the show. With that being said, a lot of my predictions will be kind of catered towards that idea that it is a longer episode, that it is arguably the longest episode, because this episode has to reveal stuff. This has to be our reveal episode. And kind of the same way Game of Thrones used to do it, obviously not very comparable in quality, these two shows, but if you're structuring the show after something like that, you'd have your major twist in 9, and then 10 would be the explanation, the aftermath of that twist. And so if we're doing the twist here, I feel like all the information needs to pretty much be revealed in this episode. Like, I think we need to know why the Jedi were there. I really hope this episode starts with that 16 years earlier intro we started episode 3 with, but this time it's from the perspective of the Jedi. You see a ship come down onto Brendok and land, and we see why they're there. Who are these Jedi? We don't really know anything about them. What are they doing here? Are they radicals? Are they sent here on a mission? Are they on their own? Is Indara kind of some type of obsessive with prophecy or the Sith or the occult, right? Is there some reason they're tracking these witches? or is it just happenstance, right? And I don't think it is happenstance. I feel like we've got to get a real reason why they are there. So that's the first thing I really want and need from this episode is who are these Jedi and why should we care about them? The second thing we need is obviously an explanation about the fire and all of that. And I agree. I think we are getting that Kelnaka fight. I think the Kelnaka is going to be the one who scars Torben too. I think that's going to be the case in that. I think his claws or something. It would be cool. We have to have a Wookiee fight. We have to see all the features of a Wookiee in full battle here. Especially because Kelnaka was killed off screen. We need that defining moment for our first live action Wookiee Jedi. I hope we get that full thing. But I do think Soul is going to be interesting, whether they are able to pull him in as the good guy in a bad situation or a bad guy in a bad situation with a bunch of other bad guys. We are going to do the thing where we deconstruct the Jedi and really analyze, okay, who's right and who's wrong in what situation. And that's going to happen. We're going to have two different sides of this. We're going to have the Jedi side and we're going to have the witches side. And I think we'll get both more equally distributed in this episode than previously. Although I think we're going to start with the Jedi. I do think most of the beginning of this episode will be from their perspective. And then we're going to shift into kind of May's memory, Osha's memory side of the story. It's going to kind of morph into that side once the witches become more involved with whatever the Jedi's investigation is. We could literally transport, from that perspective and flip the camera around, do like almost a 360 type of thing, and then move into the witches. I think there's a seamless transition there from that first meeting. And I expect a lot of everything that happened with the witches prior to the first meeting to basically be concrete, like that type of stuff. I think we can believe from the last episode. It's going to be everything after that first meeting between the Jedi and the witches that is suspect. And we're going to see a lot of that retold. I think we'll start to see more about the aftermath of the testing on the kids. I think that's something that's very important to see as well. And then obviously, what goes down with this fire? Who kills who? How did the witches die? What happens to May after she falls through? We see her at the tree. What happens in between there? I think they have to connect Qimir or the Sith or the dark side group or whatever he's involved with this episode. There needs to be a strong connection with these witches to whatever the evil faction is in this show, because otherwise it feels like an extraneous element to the show that doesn't really connect with what we're doing currently in the present day storyline. So how do those two sides connect? I think that's the other thing for me that I really want to see in this, and I predict we will get, is some type of tag to this episode that feeds back into Qimir's attachment to these girls. Why does he care about them? We hear him drop the power of two line, right? That is something that is less Sith and now more part of these witches. Do their ideologies combine? What's he pulling from different factions? Is he just an amalgamation of a bunch of dark side beliefs? I think we'll get a bit more about his formation and why he cares about these girls, right? May is not just some random person he picked up and was like, I'm going to train you and become an assassin. He handpicked her for a reason. And so I think there's going to be some type of deep connection to them throughout this entire plot. I hope that it does feed back into him and his quest for power, choosing Osha over May now, who is with Soul. And I think ultimately May is going to kind of meet her fate eventually. I don't know if both of them live through the show. And if they do, I think we got to go into that, because the other thing, the bomb that was dropped in 3, the thing that everybody hated in 3 when it was announced, the big uproar online, the creation of these girls, you can't just have that line and never touch on that again. There has to be something to do with the creation of these girls. What does it mean that they are created? Is that just a line that was used as an exaggeration? Were they created by the dark side? Were they created by the Sith? Were they created by Aniseya actually, or was she given help from somebody else? There's so many things around the mysteries of this show, the things that both kind of the show in terms of its lore hinges on, that needs to be explained in this episode, or at least steps towards it needs to be explained. And then other parts of just the quality of the general parts of this show need to be given answers to make it compelling by the finale. So I think they really have to go for both here. It's a tall task. It does require a large episode and a lot of different perspectives, but I do think if they do it right, if they are able to give enough time to each one of these characters, I think they can redeem themselves with a lot of the story beats, at least beat by beat story beats in this show. Maybe not the execution of the overall show, but they definitely can redeem some of the plot points that people have been kind of scratching their heads about and saying, what's going on with this? I'm very confused about this, or this. I think that's the goal of this episode, is to just bring it all together. Finally, we are caught up with the characters. We know what's going on. The audience is now here and able to understand fully what the show is about. And that's the number one thing I want from this episode. Definitely a tall task, but I think they can do it. I also do think it ends with present day. I think you got to come back and connect. I don't know if we necessarily see Sol or May. I think we're definitely going to see Osha and Qimir. I think she's going to take off the helmet basically, and the flashback's going to end. And then we're going to have Qimir being like, I told you the Jedi weren't all you thought they were, something like that. That's going to really strengthen their bonds, because I think in 8, you're going to see that full final confrontation between Sol and Osha as it goes down, and the battle of ideologies and who's right and who's wrong. You're going to see that in 8. I think it starts here in 7. There has to be some type of connection back to the present day. Otherwise, 8's got to be a long episode too. But what do you guys think in the comments? Let us know what you think is going to happen in episode 7 of The Acolyte. What are your strongest predictions as we enter the final 2 episode stretch as we get towards the finale here in 2 weeks? Let us know in the comments. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Again, we do have one more predictions video before this is over, and then 2 more live streams where we are going to react and take your questions about the latest episodes of The Acolyte on Tuesdays around 7 p.m. Pacific. Thank you so much for watching this video, and we will see you all next time.